I've been wanting to freshen up the look of my 2004 Montesa 315 by modifying and installing a newer style 4RT rear fender. I've done this modification just one other time, but I thought I'd share my process. For this process, you'll need to have a sacrificial fender. On the OEM Fender, there are a number of tabs, pieces of plastic sticking out that we'll need to cut off so that we can nest the two fenders to trace this shape on the 4RT fender. So I have an old fender that was broken up, and I used a hacksaw blade. I think I might have even used the bandsaw and a knife in spots to get all these pieces of plastic off and get it smooth. So I've placed the new 4RT fender back in the bag to protect it. I've also used some blue painter's tape in the area that we're going to be marking and cutting. Next, we'll need to use a soft tape measure to try to find the center line of the old fender. And on this new fender, I placed the old fender on there. I found a height of approximately where we're going to be cutting. So now we'll use a soft tape measure to try to find the center line. And when we nest the two fenders together, we'll line those marks up and then trace our shape on the 4RT fender. So you can probably see I just use this soft tape measure. To find the center line, I've placed a black mark on there. Now we'll go through the same process on this 4RT fender to find the center line. Okay, I think I have my center line there. I'm also going to mark the center line a little further back on the fender because we'll need that location later on where we drill a hole for a fastener. Now that we have our center lines marked, I'm going to go ahead and finish covering up this plastic with some blue painter's tape. Now we're ready to nest the two fenders so that we can transfer our curve onto the 4RT fender so we'll know where to cut. First, I like to bolt the two fenders together so that it doesn't move and it's in the proper placement. I use the OEM bolts off the 315 and then find some sort of nut for the backside. These nuts I got in one of those metric track packs for my Honda. I just push the bolt right through the plastic and then snug it up. That'll hold it together. The second one is a little more difficult to get lined up because the two fenders do have a little bit different shape in the curvature, and we'll have to make some adjustments to the mounting tabs on the back of the 315. Now with our old 315 fender bolted on top of the new 4RT fender, we'll line up those center lines, those center marks that we made earlier, and then we can trace our shape of the fender. It might be easier to get a couple of boards like that to push down on the center of the 4RT fender. Okay, we have our line transferred on. Now we'll unbolt the old 315 fender. This was my initial guesstimation of height. Found our center lines and then traced the shape of that old 315 fender on here. Also, here's the Honda part number in case you're interested in ordering one of these 4RT rear fenders. If you cut the fender at this angle, then when the fender meets up with the tank and it sits like this, it's going to have a gap at the top in between the tank and the fender. So I like to try to cut it at the angle that it's kind of going to sit in the bike, just so that line between the fender and the tank looks good. Now on the bottom side of the new 4RT fender, there are some areas we're gonna have to trim a little bit. If you put the fender on the bike and kind of push down in the back, it'll turn white where you need to trim. So I'm just going through and using a razor blade, trimming up those areas, cutting away some of that plastic. Up here, I'm going to try to cut quite a bit of this off just so that I don't have any issues in fitment. We'll trim a little bit along here as well. And I'll cut about 2/3 of this center tab off. And these mounting brackets in the back, you'll have to bend in just a little bit because the newer fender isn't quite as wide.
I needed to do a little bit of trimming on the right side of the fender. My fuel tank seems to sit a little bit crooked in the frame, which causes the lower right corner to be a little bit further back towards the rear of the bike.
Now we'll measure the location of this mounting hole so we can drill a hole in our new fender. Now we can remove all of this tape. Lastly, I'll use this deburring tool just to clean up the edges. Okay, now that the fender's on, the last thing we need to do is work on this area where mud could get in between the fender and the air box and possibly get down into the air box. So we'll make either a piece of plastic or a piece of rubber, and we've got 2 holes that are perfect for pop riveting it on. Okay, we have a pattern cut out of cardboard. It looks like that's gonna work. So let's go cut this out of the piece of plastic we cut from the front of the 4RT fender. Here's our little piece of plastic. Get that popped up in there. So I'm just going to use a pop rivet with a washer, and I'll also put a washer on the back side. Get my second pop rivet in just to hold it in place. And I'll see if I can fit a washer on from the back side. That might be difficult. So I'll try to hold that washer in place. Get my pop rivet gun on there. All right, that's gonna work.
I like how the fender modification came out. It's not perfect, but I'm super happy with it. And with my proficiency at crashing, I'll have the opportunity to practice making another one in just a matter of weeks. Thanks for watching.